Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Sam Goodman versus Cesar Vaca fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So this is a relatively big fight for Australian boxing, and to be fair, it's a relatively big fight for Sam Goodman. Sam Goodman wasn't really too known besides Australia, on the world kind of scene before it all kicked off with him and the possibilities of him fighting Inoue. When that did all kick off and start, happening, it kind of came out of nowhere, to be completely honest. I remember Inoue had just beat, I believe it was Doheny, and or it was Neri, one of them fights, and then all of a sudden Goodman was there doing a face-off with Inoue, and it was a bit like, wow, this contender's come out of nowhere, and he's from Australia. Perhaps he might be able to do something. Yes, it wasn't the exciting Akhmadaliev fight that everybody wanted, but it was still, a new contender, an unbeaten challenger, and somebody who actually could have sparked a bit of a rivalry with Inoue. Like I say, just going over to Japan, taking it upon himself to do that and going and having a face off with the undisputed champion. It's something in which, to be fair, not too many of Inoue's opponents have done. So, like I say, it offered something a bit different, and like I say, it brought eyes towards Goodman and Goodman's career, because Goodman has been in with some tough guys. I mean, he fought Doheny and he beat him. He fought Aleem and that was a good win and he beat him. And he's beaten a couple of good unbeaten fighters as well. So he's not had a bad career, and he was definitely deserving of the shot. And it was seemingly the IBF that ordered it, which is no real surprise because the IBF are very, as shown in the past, are very quick to come in and strip fighters if they're not going to go on to fight for their contender, their top guy, which is, a bit of a shame to see quite often, because of course we saw it happen with Inoue and Canelo, where, of course, not Inoue, with Usyk and Canelo, where both of them got stripped due to them not fighting their mandatory, but instead, fighting an even better, bigger fight. And it is a bit stupid at times where we see that happen, but this one was, like I say, it was offering something a bit interesting. It seems like the Akhmadaliev fight at that point wasn't kind of there ready, waiting to happen. It seemed like Inoue still wanted a bit more time before facing Akhmadaliev, but now this is still for a world title eliminator, and Goodman's had two opportunities at fighting Inoue, and both times he had to pull out due to injury. I believe the first one was an eye cut, and the second one, maybe it was the same eye cut again. I'm not entirely sure, but it was sad to see that he had to pull out. And like I say, I've spoken to Goodman in the past, and you can tell that he did really want the fight. It wasn't him trying to slide around fighting a really tough guy. You could tell that he wanted the tough test. A lot of mandatory challengers often will wait until the tough kind of test in an undisputed champion or a really well dominating champion will go on and move on before they can go and try and contest against possibly an easier opponent for a vacant title, because perhaps that's, like I say, an easier way for them to win a world title. But Goodman wasn't, I could tell that he didn't want to do that. He was willing to face Inoue and risk it all, because it is a real risk, to be completely honest, because bar Neri, the past few opponents of Inoue, Doheny went on to fight Nick Ball. That wasn't a bad fight. But, Yijun Kim, we're never going to hear anything about. Tapales, we haven't, he hasn't tried to fight since. Fulton, yes, has gone on to become a world champion, so fair play to him. But, there's been a few guys in which definitely haven't been able to go away. Cardenas, it will be interesting to see, because, of course, he knocked down Inoue, if his stock's going to rise and if he'll get more opportunities. But, like I say, it will be interesting to see, what will happen to them as opponents, because it will mentally break you if you fight someone like an Inoue and lose, because he's that type of a fighter. He's that good of a fighter where, like I say, he can mentally break you. So, perhaps on Goodman's side, it wasn't a bad thing that perhaps he didn't go on to fight Inoue. Yes, that's probably the biggest payday in the division by far, but, nonetheless, he seems to be able to do well in Australia and sell out and main events, so that's not especially a bad thing, and he's going to be comfortable fighting this weekend at least. And like I say, it's still for a title eliminator. I think realistically, the ship has sailed for him to fight Inoue. Like I said, that is probably a bit of a shame for Goodman because, like I said, it was a big payday and I'm sure he wanted that contest. But realistically, now Inoue is going to go on to fight Akhmadaliev, seemingly in September time, and then Inoue is rumored to fight Nakatani if Nakatani beats his next opponent. And Nishida, if he wins that fight, it's rumored that Inoue is going to fight Nakatani at the end of the year or the start of next year, and then he'll probably move up. And so, you know, it shows that Goodman is probably going to have to wait around for a opportunity. Yes, he might have one or two title eliminators, but I doubt any of them will, lead to a final eliminator. And, if worst comes to worst for Inoue, the IBF will strip Inoue of his title. And, after he fights Akhmadaliev, if he wins, because he probably won't fight Goodman, and then Goodman will just get the opportunity to fight for the vacant title. And Inoue, I don't think will care about not having all the titles on the line if he fights Nakatani. Yes, it would be a big thing to have undisputed against somebody like a Nakatani, but realistically, I don't think Inoue is going to care too much at that point. He's already achieved and proven that he is the best in the division by far. So I don't think if they strip him, it's going to be, like I said, the end of the world for him. So this as a contest could inevitably lead on to become a world championship fight and, elevate Goodman into a world title opportunity, possibly. Like I say, we'll have to wait and see. Or, Cesar Vaca as well. I'm not going to underestimate or write him off, but it will be a tough contest for him to be able to win. Of course, you got to give him credit for going over to Goodman's home country and fighting him there. And like I say, the Australian crowd really do get behind their own, and I'm sure they will be doing that again. It will be, interesting to see how well it sells due to the fact that, like I say, Goodman's now of a more known name. So, Varka, he's gonna be in for a tough test against Goodman, but his last fight, Goodman, was against a Thai fighter who fought really well and actually, possibly staked a claim for making the fight a bit of a controversial decision, having all the judges go into Goodman's favour. And so, Goodman boxed well and he has his stints. I think the commentators were quite biased, but like I say, he had his stints. I like the way that he's very comfortable circling around and moving around his opponent. He's able to plant his feet at the right time and let off quick combinations. But he does, get caught with shots quite regularly, and the straight shots he can get caught with, and he can't deal with the explosiveness that well. I don't think he deals with the physicality that well. He doesn't have, like I say, that tight of a guard. Whereas Varka, to be fair, I think he's not too dissimilar of a fighter. I think he is a back foot fighter as well. So I think for the most part, it will be interesting to see two fighters up against each other who are willing to fight on the back foot and will willingly try and counterpunch. Varka did that in his last fight versus I believe it was Robles, the guy that he fought, and he fought well on the back foot. His timing was good. He was landing an uppercut, which was something in which we haven't seen too much from Goodman. That was a good shot. He was dealing with physicality, which was, his opponent was a lot more physical than that of Goodman's. And inevitably, like I say, he boxed well. He won majority of the rounds and he did dominate, possibly more so than that of Goodman. But like I say, it was a lesser opponent. He wasn't throwing combinations as smoothly. He was kind of going with the singular shots a bit more, and they were a bit wider as well. They were relatively accurate for the most part, but they were a bit wider. I think his timing was a little bit lesser. He was going for the movements around his opponent as well as Goodman, so they can both do that. But I do think that Goodman is going to have enough to be able to win this fight by a close split decision, in my opinion, to be completely honest. Yes, that is maybe a little bit of a bold shout, but inevitably, like I say, I think Goodman is going to be able to, first of all, have the judges on his side, which I don't want to give that the reason as to why he's going to win, but it, of course, will play a factor. Goodman also, though, like I say, I think he's going to throw in more so combinations. Yes, it might not be as powerful as Varka's singular shots if they land, but Goodman does have some power behind him. I think a lot of people underestimate his power due to a lot of unanimous decisions in which he's got on his record, but he can fight at a high level. Like I say, he's proven that on his record, and he can cause stoppages, he can cause damage, and I think if he grows into this and grows in confidence, if he starts coming onto the front foot, I think he's going to be able to have success. Then who he goes on to fight next, of course, the Inoue fight perhaps by some miracle could be there if something happens with this Akhmadaliev fight, or if Inoue beats Akhmadaliev and doesn't go on to fight Nakatani afterwards, possibly. If not, I think a Cardenas fight could be an excellent fight. Like I say, Cardenas' stock definitely went up after his performance versus Inoue just the other weekend, so again, that could be an excellent fight. Or Picasso. Picasso is mandatory, I believe, on the WBA side for Inoue, and was, almost seemingly made to fight him, and, was rumoured as an opponent for Inoue's last fight. So that could possibly happen. He's a top-ranked fighter who, yes, has a 31, I believe, and 0 record, but yes, hasn't, been tested too much either. So, Goodman definitely would have the better resume on Picasso, but I think that could be an excellent fight. So there definitely is some really good fights there, but we just have to see which way that Goodman goes. He could wait it out, like I say, for a possible vacant title, or he could try and go for another top contender. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video. If you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.